This is devastating to the New York Islanders and their playoff chances, as in a 4-3 loss to the Philadelphia Flyers, the Islanders suffered another massive injury. And compared to the recent injuries that have bit the New York Islanders, this one is likely the most consequential for what they're capable of doing this season, and will likely be the most difficult one to overcome. We're going to discuss it on this episode of Islanders Digest and really touch on some of the ways the Islanders are likely going to approach trying to replace Kyle Palmieri in the lineup. And unfortunately, this is going to be a long-term fix as he is likely out for the season. Kyle Palmieri has torn his ACL. He's out for 6 to 8 months. Unless the Islanders make a really deep run, it's likely that he is not going to return for the season. And even if he did return, it would be in the Stanley Cup Finals. That's really the timeline we're looking at the best case scenario. And again, you have to keep in mind with an ACL injury like this, Kyle Palmieri is 34 years old, and I'm just wishing him at this point the best recovery. Hopefully he can come back next season and really return to form, because he's been so critical for the Islanders this season, which really makes this a tough injury to swallow. Kyle Palmieri, I think sometimes he doesn't get enough credit for what he does on this team. It's funny, if you look at Islanders game logs, game to game, you'd be shocked that from the forwards, Kyle Palmieri is typically playing the most minutes on this team. He's very effective on the penalty kill. He struggled this season on the power play, but that just shows how good his 5-on-5 production is, because he's been one of the most productive Islanders this season. Even injured, struggling to get off the ice, he managed to put up one more assist for the Islanders in a critical play that got them a point in this game for the shootout, got them to the point where they could lose this game in a shootout rather than regulation and get a point in the game. But the impact of losing Kyle Palmieri is going to be really big for the Islanders to overcome. And I saw a lot of people on Twitter were calling the Islanders to make a big trade and acquire another big winger. Kyle Palmieri is not a player who's easily replaceable. You can make the argument that he can't be replaced in the middle of a season, especially looking at what he's done for the Islanders this season. In terms of their point scores this season, he is ranked number 4 out of all the Islanders. He had 6 goals, 12 assists. He's basically on pace for another 25-plus goal season for the Islanders, and considering what he does, especially 5-on-5 for the Islanders, team that's really struggled at points to consistently have some offense. He's a player who's really been able to play with everybody on the top 6. He's played with Bo Horvat and been productive. He's one of the players who plays well with Mathew Barzal, and currently he's struggling to find consistent wingers, and this is just brutal for the Islanders. And considering how tough the trade market is, I'm going to just come out and say the Islanders are not going to be able to find a trade to acquire a player of a similar caliber, if not better, than Kyle Palmieri. It's just not out there unless you're incredibly overpaying. And considering where the Islanders are, especially now that Kyle Palmieri is out, doesn't make sense for the Islanders to trade future assets. You could have maybe made the argument if this team was rolling and really had a lot of momentum going into the trade deadline and everyone was healthy, that maybe you add a little bit more to really push them over the top. Losing a piece like Kyle Palmieri, it's really hard to see the Islanders competing on the level that they did while he was in the lineup. I'm not saying the season is over or anything like that, but this is going to be a major blow, and it's really going to test the Islanders and their depth, which was their strength going into this season. In past weeks, we've been talking about how deep this forward lineup is. It now took a major hit. And if there's one thing that's to take away out of this that's positive, other than Kyle Palmieri getting a ton of recognition in the media, not just from hockey fans, so sports fans all around the world, really crediting him with how tough he is to still get an assist on that play when he was clearly dealing with his ACL, and it's really hard to see him struggle to get off the ice just because you knew how tough Kyle Palmieri is. I knew right away when he pulled up like that, I knew something was wrong. I was hoping maybe it would be a situation where he didn't fully tear the ACL, but you could tell it was going to be something with either the ACL or the meniscus. And again, I'm just hoping he has a speedy recovery. But for this season, the Islanders are going to have to look at what to do without Kyle Palmieri. And the one positive you can say, if there is any positive with a player getting injured, it's hard to say positive when players going to miss the entire season, just 25 games in. But that would be Max Shabanov now has an opportunity to consistently play in the top 6. At this point, there's really no one else you can make an argument for deserving that spot next to Horvat more than Shabanov. It's a shame that he got this opportunity from Palmieri going out. I've been arguing for the past few videos that I want to see Shabanov on that top power play unit. I want to see him playing in the top 6 with either Bo Horvat or Mathew Barzal. I think this is a player who has a lot more. Game after game, he is showing that he has another level to his game. It's a shame that he gets this opportunity from Kyle Palmieri coming out of the lineup. But that's something you can take away, as now this younger player is going to have an opportunity to really show that he belongs in the top 6 of an NHL team. The counter to that is, with Shabanov no longer on your third line, you now suddenly have a situation where this team is no longer as deep as it was. And considering the Islanders are a team that on offense, they really contribute as a unit together, this is a big blow. I'm not saying this third line of Holmstrom, Ritchie, and Duclair is a bad third line. In fact, the Islanders are lucky they have a player like Duclair for situations like this, when you're going to need the next man to step up. Duclair can definitely hold his own on a third line, but it's just not the same caliber as a player as a Kyle Palmieri, Shabanov, Drouin. The depth is really getting tested for the Islanders at this point, and we now have a question of who's going to get called up into this lineup, because the Islanders are basically playing every single forward they have up in the NHL as of right now, especially considering that Pageau is also injured week to week. We're hoping we'll get him back for Christmas, but they're going to have to call up some forwards. I think while they have been trying really hard not to dip into that LTIR space, once they go on the road, they are going to have to dip in. And now the question comes, who are the Islanders going to be calling up? Because while none of these players are going to be playing in Palmieri's spot, that's going to be Shabanov, somebody's going to have to fill the role on that roster that every single player is playing for the Islanders. You're going to be seeing a lot more McLean. I know a lot of Islander fans aren't going to be too happy about that. You're likely going to see, if I had to guess, you're likely going to see Mark Gatcomb coming back up for the Islanders. Again, he has NHL experience, and from there it's going to be really interesting. I think there's an opportunity now, and again, we talk about injuries. It's not good to see a player like Palmieri get injured, but the one good thing that comes out of injury situations is young players sometimes get their opportunity. Before, it was looking like this was a season where there was no chance Mathieu would have the opportunity to work his way into an NHL lineup. It looked impossible. Now, looking at these forward lines for the Islanders, while I don't think they're there yet, we're getting closer to the point where Mathew is definitely going to get a look. Maybe he'll even come up as an extra forward, and I can really see if there's another injury, hoping that does not happen, but there's another injury to this forward group, or if the Islanders eventually decide to end up trading off pieces now that Kyle Palmieri is no longer with the club for the season, I can see Mathew getting a look. He's been very effective in Bridgeport this season. Had a tough year last year, but now under Rocky Thompson, he's really riding the ship. In 18 games, he has 14 points. And keep in mind with Maggio, he had to work his way back up the depth chart. He started this season in the AHL, really getting fourth line minutes, and he proved that he deserves more time, and he's been playing well. Joey Larson is a player they signed last year who's really making some heads turn in the AHL. And then the third player I think I'll note is Alex Jeffries, has 12 points in 18 games. He's also pretty well, playing pretty well. It's a good chance we're going to see some more players from Bridgeport. Definitely going to see some people called up, because the Islanders need more bodies at this point. I think they're trying to hold off as long as they possibly can to accrue as much money as they possibly can, but at this point, with all the injuries, the Islanders are probably going to have to dip into LTIR space eventually, and it'll be interesting to see who they call up when that happens. Let me know in the comments who you want to see the Islanders call up out of the players in the AHL. Do you want to see the Islanders make a trade? I know a lot of people are super excited with how the Islanders have been playing, a little bit better than some people expected this season. I don't think a trade is right at this point in time. Realistically, unless you're giving up a second-round pick or a high-end asset, you're not getting anything that can replace Kyle Palmieri in return. And if you're giving that up, it doesn't really make sense to give that up for the future, just to replace Kyle Palmieri. It'd be one thing if you were getting a young player to make this team better on top of Kyle Palmieri. Now that he's out, it's going to really complicate things. On a final note, we're speaking of Bridgeport. I do want to give a shout out to Travis Mitchell. He was not noticeable at all in that game against Philadelphia. And when you're a defenseman playing your first game in the NHL, not being noticed is a good thing. We always give credit to Schaefer for being so noticeable, so impactful in a game. But realistically, you want to not notice your third pair defenseman at all. And for that, I have to say he had a really strong first game in the NHL. I really hope they give him another opportunity based on how he played in that game. And on the counterpoint, so what I'm saying, Tony DeAngelo was perhaps the most notable defenseman for the Islanders in that game for all the wrong reasons. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't want your second and third pair defensemen to be all too noticeable, especially in the defensive end. And Tony DeAngelo had a terrible game in the defensive zone, but that just highlights what I'm saying with Mitchell, where he was very sound defensively, and that is a positive takeaway. So far, the call-ups from Bridgeport for the Islanders have been strong this season. Unfortunately, it seems like they're going to have to continue testing that depth. But that's going to do it for this episode of Islanders Digest. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm your host, Patrick Nilan. Catch you on the next episode. Let's go, Islanders.